Oh, let me slate.
Yeah.
Okay, recording. Sound check. All right. All right, slate.
What's your name?
My name is Truong.
And where do you live and what do you do when you don't create art?
I live between New York and North Carolina, so I keep a place in Brooklyn, New York, and also live and work in Durham, North Carolina, because I teach at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So, yeah. What was the second part? Sorry, did you already
well, what do you do when you don't create art?
Okay.
You answered it.
Okay. Yes. So
Yes.
I teach at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Okay. Well, can you please tell us a little bit about your work and your approach to your art?
Yeah, I work in mostly video, photography, and sound installation. And most of my work stems from an interrogation of sort of the photographic or filmic image and the archive as kind of a tool that was sort of bound up with the colonial enterprise, the European colonial enterprise. So a lot of my work stems from research in the archives and looking at the uses and sort of mobilizations of the image in sort of the use of a certain kind of narrative. So my work really interrogates specific sort of master narratives that are about history and memory and war, and interrogating these narratives through a kind of recuperation of certain kinds of images. A lot of my work also has a kind of performative element. So some of my work also does what I would call kind of a performative documentary process, where I'm interested in sort of how, again, okay, I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh.
It's my fault.
No, it's okay.
I was just thinking of my...
No, sorry.
Yes.
Let me see if I'm like really,
Okay.
I'm really...
Yes, that's fine. It's more...
The lights are really hot.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just grab something really quick? Sorry. I'm gonna get my get it something to just fan myself for a second. Sorry to interrupt. Are you guys gonna be editing this so it's
Yes,
not
yes,
one
yes, yes.
long
He
tape?
will, so we'll take
You'll
care
be
of
editing
it.
it. Okay. Sorry about that.
So basically, talking about your work, right? That is interrogating the colonial enterprise. What do you mean when you say you want to interrogate the colonial enterprise?
Well, let me try to back up. Okay.
Yes.
So my work is really interested in
Yes.
how the camera has been used
Okay.
since as a tool for colonial in the colonial enterprise. So, the advent and the sort of development of photographic and filmic technology went hand in hand with kind of modernism and a kind of colonial sort of project that was, the camera and images have been used to sort of both both dictate a certain kind of image and understanding of other people, right? So my use of images are really bound up with the particular kind of historical use of the camera in that historical way, in sort of rethinking history around, specifically around, Vietnam and other Asian countries, historical narratives about Asia and other countries. I'm sorry, I'm like totally losing it. This is harder than I thought.
No, this is great. I know, it's hard to
It is,
say
it's really hot
I know,
too.
it's like say, what's
Yeah.
a dissertation in 2 sentences?
I know.
So in your work, seems like the content and the form it really is really important, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a language.
Yes,
and
exactly.
You don't want people just to pay attention to the content, but
Right.
also like how the content
Yes.
is being reproduced and presented.
Exactly.
Right?
So you
Yes.
say it better than me at this point.
Please
Under this pressure.
tell us about
Yeah.
the importance of the form in telling the story.
Yeah. So the camera, I'm really interested in how the camera has been used as a truth-telling tool, right? So the way in which the camera as a kind of indexical form, through the sort of mimetic doubling of the real, has sort of, sort of fostered a certain kind of language and understanding about reality based on the photographic and the filmic image. Because it is indexical, we sort of automatically assume a certain kind of truth or a certain kind of reality based on that image. So I'm really interested interested in sort of interrogating those forms, those aesthetic and formal conventions of the camera vis-a-vis documentary and ethnographic film as a way to sort of interrogate the truth of the image. So a lot of my work is bound up with those aesthetic conventions to try to interrogate how we come to know about other people, and specifically around Vietnamese history and other histories in Asia, and specifically around war, mostly because war has been one of the sort of primary sort of pivot points for how, or sort of encounter points between the West and Asia. So, topically they are typically my work really deals with histories around war and violence, because that's sort of the contact point between the West and Asian histories and Asian people. So my work really deals with the way in which the camera, both the filmic and the photographic camera, purports to tell a certain kind of truth about the world, and the camera as a way, the camera interrogates the way that the camera, is a way that cameras and images produce knowledge, and the production of knowledge through images, photographic and filmic narratives. And so my work vis-a-vis the camera is interrogating certain kinds of histories that have been perpetuated about Asia and Vietnam.
So if you're going to give example, because not everybody will understand what you say.
Yeah.
Maybe you're thinking like through the lens of the video camera, like you challenge, for example, the authority of documentary film about the war, or the media representations about the war in Vietnam, or how the war in Vietnam had been represented here, right? Or in Hollywood movie or documentary or TV, that's what you say?
Yeah. So most of my a lot of my work about Vietnam has been vis-a-vis war images, because this was my initial contact and understanding of Vietnam growing up in the late 70s and 80s in the U.S. My sort of broad historical knowledge of Vietnam was through the U.S. American photographic image. So that began my interrogation of Vietnamese history, because what I was understanding as Vietnamese history was being told through a lens that I couldn't understand, that really was, super contradictory to how I understood myself as being both American but also not, being both inside and outside. So really early on, that was sort of my entry point into art, because I understood my place as not being here or there. So always sort of looking at these images and recognizing this kind of dissonance and this kind of contradiction. So immediately, my interrogation of the image stems from those kinds of documentary images, both in film and in photographs. So one of my earliest photo projects that I ever did was using, I reappropriated photographic images of the U.S. Vietnam War, and sort of rephotographed them and manipulated them in the darkroom using alongside my own family photographs. It was kind of a pretty simple approach to just sort of put these two histories side by side, and for me it was a way of sort of identifying or recognizing this contradiction and the real sort of conflict of being in sort of a hybrid position, and also challenging the kind of narrative that Americans understood about Vietnam. So in general, my approach to my work has always been bound up with certain aesthetic and formal conventions stemming from documentary images and ethnographic or documentary moving image films or videos.
So in a way, your work is a response of you growing up not seeing yourself, the story of your family, or what you understood of your family and your history in those works. Growing up, it was, in looking at these images, it was always a matter of recognizing that I was never present. I couldn't find myself, And I think that began also my interest in looking in the archives, because looking through the archives was always kind of a way of looking for myself and looking for my family and never finding myself. So it was impossible to look through the American archives and not finding myself there, and looking through Vietnamese
archives and not finding myself there either. So in some ways, my work has always been about that kind of absence and a kind of recognition of a kind of sort of negative position or an absent position or a silent position within both of those histories.
So maybe some of the doubling of the image in your work has to speak about that, right? About the absence and the absence of mirroring, maybe, and then you wanting to have that.
Absolutely. The doubling of the image or mirroring of the image has been a kind of strategy that I've used in approaching the filmic image. It's a doubling to sort of both, I mean, specifically in the piece that you're referring to, The Past is a Distant Colony, which is in the show downstairs, that piece really uses the mirroring device as a way also for the image to look at itself. You know, in some ways that I was sort of trying to refer to the kind of closed sort of narrative within the archive itself, and that mirroring process and sort of the kind of almost grotesque center where the two images meet as a way to sort of interrogate, that position of the archive only almost always speaking to itself, you know, that it is a history that is also, you know, archival images are always bound up with a certain kind of nostalgia too about a kind of pure past or a kind of pure understanding of historical, you know, progress or progression, a kind of modernist narrative, I think. And so the mirroring to me also is about that process of sort of it being closed in and on itself. It's always like folding in on itself and always sort of reinforcing itself by its very sort of archival existence.
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
So do you think, well,